Well, hello, boys and girls, and welcome back to Story Time with Mr. S. Last time I read a book to you guys, it was this book right here, this chapter book. It was called The Mouse and the Motorcycle. And it was pretty long and it was pretty exciting. And I got a lot of positive feedback from you guys about it, so I know you must have liked it a lot. So I'd like to read another chapter book to you, and oddly enough, it's also about a mouse. It's about the same size, so it's another big one. It's called Stuart Little, and it's a little bit different than the mouse and the motorcycle. For example, in the mouse and the motorcycle, he lived out in the country somewhere in a hotel, and in Stuart Little, this little mouse lives with a family in New York City. So it's a little different. Also, there's no motorcycle in it. But it is pretty exciting, and I'm going to read a different chapter of it every day to you guys for the next couple of weeks. So here it is. It was written by E.B. White. It has, let's see, 10, 11, 12, 13. It has 15 chapters. And just like the mouse and the motorcycle, there are not a lot of pictures in this book. So I would like you guys, as you are hearing me read it to you, to close your eyes and imagine what the characters in it look like. And if you want to, maybe get a piece of scrap paper and doodle what you think they look like it, and then have your mom or dad or whoever takes care of you help you put those pictures on my Google Classroom page. And I would love to see them as I read this story. But without further ado, let me get into it. It is Stuart Little, and the first chapter is called In the Drain. When Mrs. Frederick C. Little's second son arrived, everybody noticed he was not much bigger than a mouse. The truth of the matter was, the baby looked very much like a mouse in every way. He was only about 2 inches high, and he had a mouse's sharp nose, a mouse's tail, and a mouse's whiskers, and the pleasant, shy manner of a mouse. Before he was many days old, he was not only looking like a mouse, but acting like one too, wearing a gray hat and carrying a small cane. Mr. and Mrs. Little named him Stuart, and Mrs. Little made him a tiny bed out of 4 clothespins and a small box. Unlike most babies, Stuart could walk as soon as he was born. When he was a week old, he could climb lamps by shimmying up the cord. Mrs. Little saw right away that the infant clothes she had provided were unsuitable, and she went to work and made him a fine little blue suit with a patched pocket in which he could keep his handkerchief, his money, and his keys. Every morning before Stuart dressed, Mrs. Little went into his room and weighed him on a small scale which was really meant for weighing letters. At birth, Stuart could have been sent by first-class mail for 3 cents, but his parents preferred to keep him rather than send him away. And when, at the age of a month, he had gained only 1/3 of an ounce, his mother was so worried she sent for the doctor. The doctor was delighted with Stuart and said that it was very unusual for an American family to have a mouse. He took Stuart's temperature and found that it was 98.6, which is normal for a mouse. He also examined Stuart's chest and heart and looked into his ears with a flashlight. Not every doctor can look into a mouse's ears without laughing, but the doctor tried. Everything seemed to be all right, and Mrs. Little was pleased to get such a good report. "Feed him up," said the doctor cheerfully, as he left. The home of the Little family was a pleasant place near a park in New York City. In the morning, the sun streamed in through the east windows, and all the Littles were up early as a general rule. Stuart was a great help to his parents and to his older brother George because of his small size and because he could do things a mouse could do and was agreeable about doing them. One day, when Mrs. Little was washing out the bathtub after Mr. Little had taken a bath, she lost a ring off her finger and was horrified to discover it had fallen down the drain. "What had I better do?" she cried, trying to keep the tears back. "If I were you," said George, "I should bend a hairpin in the shape of a fish hook and tie it on to a piece of string and try to fish the ring out with it." So Mrs. Little found a piece of string and a hairpin, and for about half an hour she fished for the ring, but it was dark down in the drain, and the hook always seemed to catch on something before she could get down to where the ring was. "Any luck?" said Mr. Little, coming into the bathroom. "No luck at all," said Mrs. Little. "The ring is so far down I can't fish it up." "Why don't we send Stuart down after it?" suggested Mr. Little. "How about it, Stuart? Would you like to try?" "Oh, yes, I would," Stuart said, "but I think I better get into my old pants. I imagine it's wet down there." "It is, all of that," said George, who was a trifle annoyed that his hook idea hadn't worked. So Stuart slipped into his old pants and prepared to go down the drain after the ring. He decided to carry the string along with him, leaving one end in his father's hand. "When I jerk the string 3 times, pull me up," he said. And while Mr. Little knelt in the tub, Stuart slid easily down the drain and was lost to view. In a minute or so, there came 3 quick jerks on the string, and Mr. Little carefully hauled it up. There at the end was Stuart, with the ring safely around his neck. "Oh, my brave little son," said Mrs. Little proudly, and she kissed Stuart and thanked him. "How was it down there?" asked Mr. Little, who was always curious to know about places he had never been to. "It was all right," said Stuart. But the truth was the drain was very slimy, and it was necessary for him to take a bath and sprinkle himself with a bit of his mother's violet water before he felt himself again. Everyone in the family thought he had been awfully good about the whole thing. And that, boys and girls, is the end of Chapter 1. Man, there was a lot of stuff happening in Chapter 1. Let's talk about what we learned. First of all, we learned that Stuart is a mouse, and that he has a mother and father and a brother, and he lives in New York City. His brother's name is George. And it seems like Stuart was just born like any other kid, except he was a mouse. So that's their family. And then Mrs. Little, his mother, dropped her ring into the bathtub drain. Have you ever seen a bathtub drain? They're dark, scary places. And George, his brother, thought he could fish it out with something called a bent hairpin. Now, a hairpin is like a straight pin, but it's something that girls and ladies wear in their hair. So he bent it into a hook and tried to get the ring out of the tub, but he couldn't. So Stuart went down there into the slimy, disgusting bathtub and got the ring for his mother. At the end here, he said he needed to take a bath and sprinkle himself with a bit of his mother's violet water. Does anybody know what violet water is? I had to check it out for myself because I wasn't quite sure. Violet water is like perfume. So after he climbed into that slimy, disgusting drain, he took a bath and then put perfume on his body so he didn't smell like a bathtub drain. Well, boys and girls, that is the end of Chapter 1. I hope you guys like this story. We're going to read Chapter 2 tomorrow, and we'll read it for the next couple of days until we're done with this story. I want you to think already, is it different than this one? The mouse and the motorcycle? I mean, of course it's different, but how are the mice different? This mouse lived with his mother and his brothers and sisters in a hole in the wall. This mouse lives with a family in a regular room. Tell me what you guys think about that. Leave me a comment on my Google Classroom page, and don't forget to click the turned in button after you've seen it so that I know you've seen it. And we're going to read the exciting chapter number 2 tomorrow. So check back tomorrow, boys and girls. Have a good night.